I find this video interesting for several reasons. One being that the left is typified in a level of arrogance that tells them they are above the objective aspects of reality that would render their ideology at minimum insufficient. And watching Destiny, this, what you could actually say is one of the most mentally competent ideologues that the left has to offer, try to debate or catch Jordan Peterson or even try to expound upon or improve anything he has to say, is embarrassing to watch because he thinks he's capable of it, because the left tells him that he must be capable of it. In reality, through the duration of this entire conversation, which is about 2 hours, but I'm just going to show you this clip here, he gets what you could really only describe as educated by Jordan. As he tries to catch him in saying something insufficient or wrong, or tries to debate him on a topic that is mild and unimportant, he gets instantaneously brought back to earth and reality while showing that what he was trying to do was dishonest and a lowly intellectual pursuit. Let me show you what I mean.
Have to ask, because I have watched a lot of your stuff in the past. I remember you speaking very distinctly on this, that for instance, when two men are communicating with each other, there is an underlying...
For those of you who don't know, Destiny is a leftist. He's a liberal. He's very short. He dyes his hair blue and different colors. His IQ is about 125. His wife recently left him for a man in a dress. And he's known for arguing, and when I say known for, I'm talking about very intelligent people who can see through exactly what he's doing. He's known for disagreeing, even when disagreement is illogical, wrong, and wouldn't even lead to further fruit. And you could call this a type of intellectual insecurity he has, perhaps. But I think it's actually as a result of the leftist ideology.
Threat of force that kind of puts on the guardrails those particular social interactions. For instance,
Destiny is upset by the fact that men make him unimpressive by comparison. This is, I think, the reason why he denied the objective biological emergent fact and measurable principle called hypergamy. He's been on the Fresh and Fit show many times where he's denied hypergamy, the basic evolutionary biology fact that women prefer to date up and across socioeconomic hierarchies. So he is here, of course, insecure about objective fields like biology and psychology and neuroscience, etc., behavioral science.
Threat of force that kind of puts on the guardrails those particular social interactions. For instance,
the threat of force is don't be psychopathic.
What is how broader is psychopathic here?
And by the way, the reason why this is going to come up many times, I want you to look at this.
Defining.
Well, I can define it. I mean,
sure, yeah, go for it.
Well, a psychopath will gain short-term advantage at the cost.
This isn't a normal interaction, and it takes a lot to notice what I'm talking about here, but this is not a normal interaction. Destiny has been known to be psychopathic before in his debates with people that aren't equipped to deal with his low-resolution, argumentative style. Jordan Peterson is a titan compared to Destiny. We're talking orders of magnitude more capable. And so the reason Destiny is not appearing psychopathic in this conversation, ironically, is because he can't get away with it, which exactly proves what Jordan Peterson is saying. Now, I'm not saying Destiny is as psychopathic as other absolute, demonic forces you see on the left. Because when it comes to the people that deny reality and push for communism and hate the human spirit, it's a really, really deep pit on the left. But I still have seen Destiny act in psychopathic manners on Fresh and Fit, as he insists that the leftist ideology somehow trumps evolutionary biology.
Cost of long-term relationship.
Okay.
That's really the core issue. Well, you made a reference to something like that earlier in your discussion when you pointed out that people claim to be motivated, let's say, by principle, but will default to short-term gratification more or less at the drop of a hat. Yeah, exactly. Well, the exaggerated...
If you guys watch the full analysis, the full conversation between these two, Jordan Peterson basically psychoanalyzes Destiny and tells him why he has the political opinions that he has, and simultaneously in doing so, without it being said out loud, he also tells him why all of his ideas are insufficient as they are built on presuppositions that aren't equipped to fully confront reality.
Proclivity to do that is at the essence of psychopathy. So it's a very,
I'm curious with this definition of psychopathy.
Very immature. Destiny then interrupts him.
It's the definition of psychopathy. It's not it's not mine.
So Jordan Peterson has done this multiple times in a long conversation. This is only an 8-minute video, but he's done this multiple times where he just corrects Destiny, bringing him into alignment with objective reality, and in so doing showing how out of alignment he was for basically his entire life as he says things that are not correct.
That's the core of psychopathy.
Okay, I'm not. In the United States, I think we call it all ASPD now.
No,
What does he mean? We call it. He's not a psychologist. This is very, very funny. This is another manifestation of the leftist narcissism. What does he mean by we? This is very interesting.
of psychopathy.
Okay, I'm not. In the United States, I think we call it all ASPD now.
Okay, so he read this on Wikipedia. Now he's going to get owned.
No, it's separate from, that's antisocial personality disorder. They're
I thought that
separate.
subsumed psychopathy and sociopathy.
Psychopathy is,
Yet again, no. And what do you mean you thought? You mean you read a Wikipedia article? He's talking to not just a PhD in psychology with, decades of experience, research, and clinical practice. He's talking to one of the premier psychologists humanity has arguably ever produced. And he's trying to say, no, I thought this was this. This is the definition of leftist narcissism. Very interesting.
no, psychopathy is more like it's more the pathological core of antisocial personality disorder.
Okay, maybe that might be
So
true. Okay.
that's a better way of
What
thinking.
does he mean? Okay, maybe that might be true. Dude, this would be like someone trying to debate how to play the violin or how to play a piece of Mozart with me, who's essentially who's never held a violin in their entire life, but they've watched a video of, professional musician Hilary Hahn performing, and then they're trying to argue with me. It's like, you have no idea on how many levels you are incorrect and not knowledgeable on what you are talking about. Expertise is built on endless levels of analysis.
Like the worst, a small number of criminals are responsible for the vast majority of crimes. It's 1% commit 65%.
Again,
something
Jordan
like
Peterson.
that.
Again, Jordan Peterson is educating him.
Is psychopathy something that can be environmentally induced, or do you think this is core to a person?
It's both. So, for example, if you're disagreeable, like you are, by the way,
I was thinking about this earlier. I don't think Destiny's actually a very disagreeable person. I think he's more intellectually insecure. Because I'm a very disagreeable person. I score very low in the agreeableness percentile, and I feel as though I could walk all over Destiny. Maybe that's just because of his stature. I'm not sure, but
proclivity, if you went wrong, would be to go wrong in an antisocial and psychopathic direction. That's more true of men, for example, than it is for women. That's why men are more likely to be in prison.
I love how this is all material Jordan Peterson has talked about extensively on countless lectures and also podcasts and interviews. And so if you actually listen to anything that he says rather than just reading Wikipedia articles, you would know this already.
A lot. I think it's 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 generally. It depends on the particular crime. So, for example, if you're high in trait neuroticism, you're going to be quite sensitive to the suffering of others and be able to detect that. That's useful for infant care. But the cost you'll pay is that you'll be more likely to develop depression and anxiety. And if you're disagreeable, extroverted, and unconscientious, then the place you'll go if you go badly is in the psychopathic or antisocial direction. And there are environmental determinants of that to some degree.
Sure, genes express themselves in an environment. I agree.
So again, that's not what he said. If you want to listen to an actual evolutionary biologist talk about genes, listen to Brett Weinstein talk with Jordan Peterson. Now that's an interesting conversation. This is an expose that Destiny isn't even aware he's putting on, which is a look into the narcissistic, incompetent leftist hive mind. Again, I can't stress how obvious it is, how blatantly transparent this is for people that are smart enough to understand what's going on here. Destiny is a walking admission as to how incompetent the left is, given that he is the most competent leftist.
I'm just curious for the definition of psychopathy for short-term gain at the expense of long-term
Relationship. Really. That's probably the best bit. Yeah.
When you look at stuff like people that are self-destructive, say people that engage in behaviors like obesity, is that like a type of psychopathy to you, or is that like something different, or how do you define these types of things, I guess? Or how do you...
That comes out of left field. So again, he's trying to catch Jordan Peterson, make his argument look insufficient, but really what he's doing is just admitting he can't think.
do that type of thing?
Well, no. There is an overlap in that addictive processes, one of which might lead to obesity, do have this problem of prior...
Destiny wanted to go on here to try to demonstrate that he was of some intellectual weight, but instead he just got owned repeatedly. I should say educated repeatedly, because that's even worse.
Of the short term. But so that overlaps with...
It's not bad for, a student to try to learn something from someone who's more experienced than them, but Destiny thinks that he's Jordan Peterson's equal on matters of psychology.
The short-term orientation of the psychopath, but a psychopath is... See, an obese person isn't gaining anything from your demise to facilitate their obesity, right? So there's a predatory and parasitical element to psychopathy that's not there in other addictive short-term processes.
Do you think, is it possible that there are things, because then to circle back to the tribal example I gave, isn't it possible that people can commit harms against other people where they're not necessarily gaining from their demise, but it's just some other sort of gain that they're thinking about it? So for instance, like say like I'm talking to some friends and I'm just gossiping or shit talking another person. I'm not necessarily feeling good that I'm trashing them per se. I'm feeling good because this
Wow, an admission. That's very, very interesting. Wow.
group of friends might view me more favorably.
We know that Destiny obviously does that, right? And if you don't know the internet history, then I'm not going to explain it here. But he's making an admission here that he understands that that is what he's done.
I have like a gossip or something to share with them.
Well, but that's the gain right there. And you are contributing to the demise of the people that you're gossiping about.
But I think there's like, I feel like there's fundamentally different type of thought process between like, I want to tell you something juicy about this guy because it'll make you like me, versus I want to tell you something juicy about this guy because I hate this guy and I want him to like have a worse reputation among people. I feel like this.
It's so interesting to watch Destiny try to justify his psychopathology and leftist narcissism as Jordan Peterson is describing psychopathy. It's incredibly interesting.
Different drivers for that.
I would say that's an interesting distinction. I would say probably that the hatred-induced malevolence is a worse form of malevolence than the popularity-inducing malevolence.
Yeah, the only reason
it's a tough one, but
yeah, the only reason I bring that up is because I feel like a lot of malevolence that we have social guardrails for is that type of like selfish.
The left is doing everything it can to remove any guardrails it has against malevolence or the objective frameworks of morality altogether.
Malevolence, where you're not, I would argue even the majority of malevolence in the world is usually people acting selfishly or being inconsiderate, not necessarily like, I hate this person.
I think that's right.
Sure,
I think that, well, that's what...
Psychopaths only account for 1 to 3% of the population, 3 at the very most unstable aspects, but so most people are not psychopaths.
Dante outlined levels of hell, right? Yeah, well, exactly that. And I mean, that book was an investigation into the structure of malevolence, right? He put betrayal at the bottom, which I think is right. I think that's right, because people who develop post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, which almost only accompanies an encounter with malevolence rather than tragic circumstances, they are often betrayed, sometimes by other people, but often by themselves. And yes, there are levels of hell, and you outlined a couple there.
So I guess then my question is just that if you have people, so the kid that steals an orange from a stand, not because he hates the shop owner, but because he wants the orange or he's hungry, without some type of societal, it doesn't have to be the government, it could be family, religious, without some type of use of force, do you think that society ever exists without...
Use force on your wife?
Well, what are we considering force? Is withholding sex, for instance, is that considered force? Or is, saying we're going to cancel a vacation?
Dude, this is taking a really interesting turn.
Expected reward is...
Destiny had a very difficult upbringing. I won't go into the full explanation because it's already on the internet, but his childhood was pretty rough and broken.
It's a punishment. So you could... Well, no, but I mean, this is a serious question. I mean, look, if we're thinking about the optimization of...
The fact that he doesn't understand that him... as a man who's expressed his delusion and inability to grasp reality on multiple podcasts publicly, and then he thinks that he's going on this, this podcast interview with Jordan Peterson to be his equal or to debate with him, is again an admission into how he's broken. The idea that anything would happen besides Jordan completely educating him the entire time is laughable. Again, this guy's wife left him for a man in a dress. Social
structures. We might as well start from the base level of social structure and scaffold up.
Sure. So right? Like if a wife is upset at a husband, for instance, would that be considered use of force? I think a negative punishment. You're removing a stimulus to punish a person for something. Yeah, would you consider that like a use of force? Or
I would say it would depend to some degree on the intent.
The intent is to punish a behavior,
well, if the intent is to punish, then it's starting to move into the domain of force. I mean, look, while we've been talking, there's been...
And immorality, of course. That's a big one.
Bursts of emotion, right? Yeah. And that's because we're freeing entropy and trying to close and to enclose it again. And so that's going to produces negative emotion, fundamentally. Most fundamentally, anxiety and pain, and secondarily, something like anger, because those emotions are quite tightly linked. Within the confines of a marriage, because we might as well make it concrete, there are going to be times when disagreements result in bursts of emotion. And those bursts of emotion don't necessarily have to have an instrumental quality, right? It's when the emotion is used manipulatively to...
Wow, it's so amazing to watch Jordan Peterson educate this guy, explaining to him, this is the reason why your wife left you.
Gain an advantage that's short-term for the person, and then maybe that's at the expense of the other person, or even at the expense of the person who benefits.
But that's actually part of the collaborative process of being in, a functional relationship with somebody. You have to be tolerant of that.
Future self. then it starts to tilt into the manipulative. There's a tetrad of traits. So narcissism,
Yes.
Machiavellianism, that's manipulativeness.
It's very interesting that two of these three traits are nested deeply in the leftist ideology, which is sadism and narcissism.
Narcissism is the desire for unearned social status. That's what you'd gain, for example, if you were gossiping and elevating your social status. Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, that's predatory parasitism, and those culminate in sadism. And that cloud of negative emotion that's released in the aftermath of disagreement can be tilted in the direction of those traits. And that's when it becomes malevolent. And that's when the problem of force starts to become paramount.
Here's the video of Jordan Peterson explaining Destiny's political affiliations to him, given his background. This is interesting too.
I had a son basically around the first year I started streaming. As I started to go through life and I went from kind of being in this like working poor position to making a lot of money, especially through the lens of my child, I saw how different life was when I had more money versus less. And I guess like the differences between what was available to me and then my child as I made more money while I was really
This guy is such a man-child.
wealthy versus not as wealthy, it kind of started to change the way that I guess.
So you got more attuned to the consequences of inequality? Is that a
basically, I would
reasonable way
say,
of thinking about it?
But at least he's open enough to admit what caused him to end up this way.
Yeah.
Okay, and so how did that lead you to develop more sympathy for left-leaning ideas, particularly?
I guess my core beliefs have never really changed, but I think the way that those become applied kind of change. So much the same way that you might think that everybody deserves a shot to go to school and have an education. That might be like a core belief where as a libertarian or conservative, I might think that as long as a school is available, everybody.
Jordan Peterson in the three-piece suit, Destiny in the sweatpants. This is like a therapy session right now.
Just got the opportunity to go and study, but maybe now as like a liberal or progressive or whatever you'd call me, I might say, okay, well, we need to make sure that there's enough, maybe like food in the household or some kind of funding program to make sure the kid can actually go to school and study, basically. So like the core drive is the same, but
your concern essentially something like the observation that if people are bereft enough of substance, let's say, that it's difficult for them to take advantage of equal opportunities, even if they are presented to them, let's say.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And you have some belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have some belief that there is room for state intervention at the level of basic provision to make those.
Right. Well, we know that Destiny is somewhat of a socialist, but the more interesting question would be exposing whether or not his ideology encompasses postmodernism. That would be very revealing.
Opportunities more manifest.
Yeah, to varying degrees, yeah.
Okay. So let's start talking more broadly then on the political side. So how would you characterize the difference in your opinion between the left and the conservative political viewpoints?
On a very, very, very broad level, if there's some like good world that we're all aiming for, I think people on the left seem to think that a collection of taxes from a large population that goes into a government that's able to precisely kind of dole out.
Wow, so he's willing to admit that the left wants to tax people at very high rates. Okay, so
where that tax money goes, you're basically able to take the problems of society. You're able to scrape off, hopefully, not super significant amount of money from people that can afford to give a lot of money, and then through government programs and redistribution,
What's very interesting is left isn't able to accurately distribute the money because their ideology refuses to distinguish between up and down, better and worse, and so the money just gets squandered and wasted.
Get that.
You see it all the time in subcommittees. Oh, like if you go watch my ballot video to explain this, there was like. Just reading Prop 1, they wanted to spend millions of dollars on subcommittees, on endless levels of bureaucracy, and then at the end it just said, this will help increase social interactions and decrease homelessness. The left doesn't know how to adequately distribute money because they can't distinguish between better and worse ideas. This is the downside of the postmodernist era.
That those taxes essentially to people that kind of need whatever bare minimum to take advantage of opportunities in society. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the conservative end, I guess a conservative would generally think that why would the government take my money? I think from a community point of view, through churches, through community action, through families, we can better allocate our own dollars to our own friends and family to help them and give them the things that they need so that they can better participate in and thrive in society, basically.
Okay, so one of the things that I've always found a mystery, I think there's an equal mystery on the left and on the right in this regard, is that the more conservative types tend to be very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations. Right? Well, following through the logic that you just laid out, you made the suggestion that one of the things that characterizes people on the left is the belief that government can act as an agent of can and should act as an agent of distribution. Okay, a potential problem for that is the gigantism of the government that does that. Now, the conservatives are skeptical of that gigantism, and likewise, the liberals, the progressives in particular, we'll call them progressives, are skeptical of the reach of gigantic corporations. And I've always seen a commonality in those two in that both of them are skeptical of gigantism. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about, generally speaking, with regard to the potential for the rise of tyranny is the emergence of giants. And one potential problem with the view that the government can and should act as an agent of redistribution is that there is an incentive put in place, two kinds of incentives. Number one, a major league incentive towards gigantism and tyranny. And number two, an incentive for psychopaths who use compassion to justify their grip on power, to take money and to claim that they're doing good. And
right, that is the postmodernist era conjoined with Marxism. So I think that's a great place to end it, considering that he concluded there with psychopathy, and that's what they talked about in the first clip. But I thought this was worth just appreciating, considering the dire straits the left is in terms of their social brand being tarnished by their anti-intellectualism and anti-truth ethos, and anti-reason, individual identity, responsibility, meritocracy. The list goes on. I mean, their brand is getting ravaged, and Destiny is considered the premier ambassador of the left-wing ideology, at least in a coherent, non-blatantly degenerate format, and still he just gets completely eviscerated by our side of the internet. It's quite interesting to see.